Well, local theater legend Bob Arley White is back in town sharing storm stories with in two special performances at Bab's Lab. Bob, nice to see you. Thanks for
It's
being
lovely to
here.
be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled.
So you spent most of your artistic career here in Jacksonville.
That's
You
right.
grew up here. You were the executive director, the artistic director at Theater Jacks for 16 years.
Hmm.
Very formative time here in the cultural history of Jacksonville,
That's exactly right.
1984 to 2000. You directed 70 plays or more in this area?
Yeah, can you believe it?
No, I can't. It's an enormous undertaking, but you moved to Asheville a couple
Yeah.
years ago.
Hmm.
Um, so tell us about that move, why you moved, what you were hoping to
Sure.
find.
Well, my dad actually had a brilliant career in the Navy. We grew up all over the planet. I moved here at the beginning of my senior year of high school. One of the real constants in my life was the mountains of North Carolina, which is where my mother's people are from. So it's been the longing of my heart to live there. And when I had an opportunity to go, I went. But it's wild. It's hilarious to me too because when I came down for this trip, people said, "Where are you going for Thanksgiving?" I said, "Oh, I'm going home." And then when I'm here, people say, "Oh, when are you going back to the mountains?" "Well, I'm going home next week." So it's nice to feel planted in a couple of places.
And so you're doing theater still in Asheville.
Hmm.
You are working at the North Carolina Stage Company, doing development for them, but you were previously at
Hmm.
the Asheville Community Theater.
Hmm.
So, what is the arts community like there compared to Jacksonville?
It's really interesting. The music scene, the visual arts scene, the craft scene is very, very, very highly and well developed. I think dance and theater are probably not as much. And, that was the story here for the longest time. We have this amazing symphony, these glorious museums, but for the longest time, it seemed to me that dance and theater were sort of underdeveloped in comparison. I don't know that you can say that now, though. There are remarkable things that are going on here, remarkable leaders, it's extraordinary talent. It's nice to see it from afar.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons that you're in town is for a performance at
Yeah.
Bab's Lab.
Hmm.
You're going to do a couple of shows there. And what you're going to be talking about is some of the experiences that you had recently in Asheville after Hurricane Helene. So,
Hmm.
first of all, just tell us, what did you experience there?
Well, it was really something because um, I think it's fair to say that we weren't expecting that. They kept telling us, "Oh, it's going to be something. It's going to be wild, but the storm is going to probably move to the west about 100 or 50 miles south of where we are." Of course, it didn't. It came right to us and sat there for a number of hours before it moved on along. And even right after it happened, I thought, "Oh, power's out, of course, but it'll be back on." For me, I didn't have power for 10 days. I didn't have water of any kind for about 3 weeks. And then we got our drinking water in the taps back um, just last week. It's 53 days without drinking water. Thank goodness for the World Central Kitchen. They brought in these gigantic cisterns that were all over the place, very near to where I live, in fact. And they brought in about 100,000 gallons of water a day, drinking water, which I just can't imagine how you would even organize such a thing. But it was a mighty blessing. In the meantime, a number of us would gather. There's a creek right behind my building, and that's where we'd, bring our buckets for our toilet flushing water. And you met all kinds of people and you heard all kinds of things. I mean, I told you the story about all the things that I did without. That was nothing compared to what so many people experienced as a function of that storm. It was incredible.
And when the storm hit, how aware were you of what was happening other places? How easy was it to understand the magnitude of what had occurred?
Not at all. Not at all, because we didn't have internet, we didn't have power, we didn't have any kind of connectivity at all. What I knew, because I'd had this experience when I was up in the mountains and Irma came through here, I saw all kinds of things that nobody in Jacksonville was aware of. And I knew that people were seeing pictures of all kinds of things I just didn't have a sense of. And it was a long time before the images that you were probably very familiar with hit my consciousness, and it was an astonishing thing. Walking around in neighborhoods, of course, you saw trees that had sort of been picked up out of the ground and jammed into the what I thought were, magnificent and impervious homes. The other thing about the trees, we lost about 41 million trees in western North Carolina, and it's astonishing because the wind was such that these gigantic trees were snapped. When you think about storms here, the water gets into the ground, it's very saturated, and the root ball comes up and all that. And there's certainly a lot of that because we had a system come through hours before the storm hit. That the worst flooding that I saw was 2 days before the storm actually got there. So the ground was really wet. But these trees that are snapped, it hurts to look at them.
I'm going to just say your event is Saturday, November 30th. Also, another performance Sunday, December 1st.
Hmm.
Information can be found at the Babs Lab in the Corks Art District. But Bob White, it's so nice to see you.
Lovely to be here.
And I appreciate you coming to town to share your storm stories.
My very great pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, thanks for being on.